So, again, welcome. Hello to everybody in the room. If you're here, pardon our dust. We're doing some renovations in the office, and I know some people walked in the door and they were like doing a double take, thinking maybe they were in the wrong place, but you're in the right place if you're here for the Freight Advisory Committee. I think what we'll do is we will start with a round of introductions. I got a sign-in sheet here, if you wouldn't mind filling that out. If you're here, if you're online, if you wouldn't mind just dropping in the chat your name and your affiliation. So we'll start going around the room. I think everybody knows me, but I'm Chris Bauer, Director of Transportation Planning here at the Capital Region Transportation Council. Go this way.
Valerie Dean, I'm from the New York State Department of Transportation Region 1 Planning and Program Management Unit.
I'm Mark Landgraf, retired state DOT rail.
John Schneiderwin, Board of Albany.
Ted Thompson, retired from DOT, retired from Shaker, retired from Food Bank, retired from Babchian for foreign car parts, retired from Glen Eddy, still driving for Hertz Car Rental.
John Scavo, Town of Clifton Park.
Adam McCarville, Transportation Council.
Tom Phelan, BHX Engineering.
All right, and now I'm just gonna quickly go around online here. We have Dave Sawitz from Price Chopper Market 32, Dave Rosenberg from New York State DOT, Jeff Grit-Savage from the Canal Corporation, Pete Bardunius from the Capital Region Chamber, Peter Comenzo from the Town of Rotterdam, and I wanted to introduce Ethan Townsend, who is also a new Transportation Council employee, and he's going to be assisting with the freight program. So we're really excited about having Ethan here. It's been really made a great impression so far. And I know he's going to be a great asset to our freight program. So just wanted to introduce Ethan. All right, and Ethan, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see the Freight Advisory Committee screen? Great.
Looks and sounds great.
All right, thank you. Oh, and one more in the room. You want to introduce yourself?
And Lou Esposito, Supervisor, Kutztown.
All right, so quick look at our agenda here. As I mentioned, you know, if you're online and you just popped in, please put your name and organization in the chat. And we will have a presentation on a e-commerce study from Pennsylvania and some updates on the state freight plan, Capital District Clean Communities, our MTP update, and some other freight planning activities we have going on right now. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce, or I'll say reintroduce our good friend Tom Phelan. And Tom, I'm just going to get your thing started here. Let me just share this. Tom is from BHX Engineering, and as many of you remember, Tom was also the project manager for our regional truck parking study. And today he's going to share an interesting study on something that we've been talking about a lot around here, and hopefully maybe you can find some lessons learned that we can share around here. So Tom, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chris, and good to meet you all folks again. I'm occasionally up in the area. Chris had reached out to me last week. He says, "Oh, he's had a cancellation on the presentations. Does he have anything I think might be of interest for our group here?" I said, "I'll tell you what, the timing was perfect. I'm working with the Pennsylvania Transportation Advisory Committee on it's kind of a research project more than anything else, but we're hitting the ground hard in implementation once this is done. And it relates to the state's interest in addressing the growth of e-commerce over the years. I had given a briefing to the York County Freight Advisory Committee because there's so much new and recent and ongoing development in e-commerce facilities, fulfillment centers, distribution centers, whatever they're called. I mean, there are different names that they use for them. So I had a presentation that was really, it's more of a status update. We're almost done with the project. There are a few final tasks we're wrapping up here. But when I mentioned it to Chris, I think this would be a great interest to the folks up here because it's obviously a subject of conversation around this table and in the world of transportation planning in general. I'm going to start by giving one prediction here. It might take 10 years. I think it's going to maybe take 5 years the most. The term e-commerce is going to disappear from our lexicon. because it's going to be just commerce. That the breakdown between traditional retailing and e-commerce is going to get so blurred that you're not even going to be thinking of it necessarily in terms of e-commerce versus traditional retail. So maybe if you're at home, you say, am I gonna go travel to a store and buy something? That might be traditional commerce to you. But in the world of planning, there's going to be no distinction between these just because of how fast e-commerce is growing and also how ubiquitous it has become and how blurred the lines are between e-commerce and traditional retail. So I'll give you just a brief bit of background here on the Transportation Advisory Committee in Pennsylvania and what it serves. I don't know if New York State has something comparable to this. Best way to start this is to describe the State Transportation Commission. The STC was established in 1970 through an act of the state legislature. And its official role is to function as the board of directors for the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation. And the whole purpose of the mission here is to evaluate. Oh, yeah, that's okay. I don't, are they looking at it online? Where do we see it here?
Yeah,
I'm
they
looking
see
at
that
this one,
online.
yeah, okay. So it's all about, to evaluate the state of performance of Pennsylvania's transportation system and assess the resources required to maintain, improve, and expand the transportation facility. It's this, again, this is from Act 120 in 1970. And then it has 13 members of the STC that are appointed. Some of these are ex officio members. Some of these are appointed by the governor. One thing I really enjoy about doing presentations before this group is that there are many political figures here, but you wouldn't know that there was any partisan politics involved. The mandate for every single member of the STC is that you have to be, your Pennsylvania's interests have to be first and foremost in your mind, all political considerations aside. So as a professional in the civil engineering world, I'm used to dealing with that, but it's great to see how they work in a group like that when you do presentations there. The Act 120 also established the Transportation Advisory Committee, and its role here, it includes some members of the STC as well as some other appointed members. And it really serves as an advisory role to the STC and the Secretary of Transportation and the legislature, the state legislature of Pennsylvania on transportation matters. So one of the things that TAC does is, as part of the planning process, is that they engage in these periodic research projects on issues of great concern, of great interest at the time that they're undertaken. So in recent years, they've had a research project I was not involved in, but I'm aware of it. It's about the changing demographics in Pennsylvania and what the implications are for transportation infrastructure needs. Changing landscape of mass transit, particularly in the bigger cities in Pennsylvania, in the post-COVID world, and what the implications are for their funding needs and their operational needs and that sort of thing. So what they've done here is for 2024, one of their research projects here was to look at, and they vote on this. The TAC members get together at the end of the prior year. They vote on it and say, hey, this is an issue that we want to look at. They say, we want to see what's going on here in the world of e-commerce and what the implications are for the transportation world, both on the infrastructure side, up on the operations side, and then also secondarily, and I only say it not that it's secondary importance overall, but it's secondary importance to a state agency is the land use implications, because state agencies in Pennsylvania have very little control of a land use process. It's a home rule state. So many of the land use decisions are being made, most of them are being made at the local level. And PennDOT is in a position of responding to needs that are generated by land use decisions outside of their control. So they had 4 basic outcomes here. We want to identify land use changes related to the growth of e-commerce, to evaluate the economic impact of these changes, to identify how these trends impact Pennsylvania's transportation networks and its implications for future needs, and then to evaluate the funding implications of this. And this last one is important because this study comes in the aftermath of another recent study that was done by a separate commission. It wasn't the TAC, as we call it, the Transportation Advisory Committee. They had looked at a range of options through this Transportation Revenue Options Commission. That's what TROC stands for. And they looked at a goods delivery fee or an e-commerce delivery fee as one of the options for replacing what has been declining revenues from the sale of fuels. That with more efficient vehicles, with more electric vehicles on the road, more fuel efficient vehicles and more electric vehicles on the road, even as traffic volumes have been steady or maybe increasing. The revenues generated by the motor fuel taxes in Pennsylvania, as in many states, has declined. So they were looking at options to replace some of those revenues here. So just, I'm gonna go through at this point, at this stage of the this project, I'll do a briefing that touches on these items here. We had a survey of all of the MPOs and RPOs in Pennsylvania to get their input on this. We had this expert panel, which is one of the, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this is one of like the highlights of my professional career, to get the group of people that we had in one place to do an online expert panel and to learn about how they perceive e-commerce, how they're addressing it in their own professional work. And you'll see one of the panelists was from Amazon itself. So once you get Amazon on a panel of e-commerce, you learn a whole bunch of things that you wouldn't necessarily have known unless you speak to somebody from inside the company. We did have a great discussion with some Colorado state representatives for package delivery fee options. And we picked Colorado in particular because that state had implemented a package delivery fee on their own, and it had been in place for sufficient time that they could give us some input on what their challenges were, what their how successful it's been. It had been in place for at least 2 fiscal years before this, whereas other states have been looking at. I think Minnesota implemented one this year. We did some research with them, but it was just too recent. They didn't have enough. They didn't have a fiscal year's worth of data to give to share with us. And then the last thing we'll get to before we have any discussion afterwards is just a description of what the case study are going to be that we're working on right now before we close this project out. The online survey here, again, we had almost a 100% response. I think there are 23 MPOs and RPOs, or 24 MPOs and RPOs in Pennsylvania. We had one recalcitrant outlier in a very rural area. That I'm not sure how valuable their input would have been, but everybody else other than this one, who shall remain nameless, responded to this. And the input we got from them was really very interesting. You see very high numbers here for the results. Most of them said that they have not done any studies related to e-commerce, but they do believe it has an impact in their regions, in their metropolitan regions or the rural regions, related to as far as both the transportation system and the land use implications are concerned. Most of them had no idea if their local communities had done any work as far as addressing what the challenges were related to e-commerce. But most of them, almost 2/3 of them, said, well, we think it's going to have an impact on transportation infrastructure and operations in our regions in the future. So there's a lot of, we don't know much about this, but we think we really need to know much. And one representative who I can cite by name, Will Clark from the Lancaster County MPO, had come back and says, I can't answer this survey very well because I don't even know what I don't know. I think there's a lot that I don't know, but I don't know what I don't know. So that I thought about that. I said, it's almost like you have to think of it as if you're in kindergarten, starting from the beginning. So we had this e-commerce panel. It was facilitated online. I happened to be the moderator, and I was doing this through a contract with Michael Baker International down there at the bottom. So I do a lot of work with them. I do a lot of work with Gannett Fleming in Pennsylvania in the Northeast. So you might hear different other company names associated with me beyond my own. We had more than 200 folks register. We had 150 official participants. We think we had closer to 200 participants because we could see that some of the registrants actually were in a conference room like this, and they sat in on the panel with, 6 or 8 or 10 people in a room. So we probably had close to 200 people sitting in on this. And these are the representatives we had. Again, the keynote really was Maura Kennedy. She's on the economic development side of Amazon out of their Philadelphia office. And her background is in economic development at the municipal level in the city of Pittsburgh. So she spoke up, she could really presented herself well as somebody who knows the landscape in Pennsylvania. Kevin Hodge, we know him from the York County Freight Advisory Committee. In fact, he's an industrial real estate broker down in South Central Pennsylvania. He brought a perspective from the developer's side. Richard Montanez from the Streets Department in Philadelphia brought a great perspective on the municipal side in an urban context. Sam Pressler, who has like 25 different hats. He actually reminds me of you when you tell us how many times he retired from different companies. He's a lot like that. An older fellow, but he's still active. He's a township supervisor in Southampton Township, and then also he's a state representative for the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors. advocacy group. So he brought a PSAS perspective more from a rural side of things. Then we had one MPO representative from York County, Chris Cabo, who I guess would be kind of Chris Bauer's counterpart with the MPO in that area. And I was the one who moderated this, and this thing ran for 2 hours. If we had 2 days, it would have been we wouldn't have had enough time to address all of the issues that people wanted to talk about. A couple things we learned from here, a few things we learned here. So many of the things that you see in e-commerce is really driven by customer needs and desires, that customers want to get things delivered to their homes and their businesses. So they are online. If Amazon has a business practice, it's almost invariably going to be in response to what they hear from their customers. There's definitely a disproportionate impact on local streets at fulfillment center locations and on urban streets. And urban streets have a somewhat different issue to deal with here. We'll talk about in a second. But if you look at a fulfillment center, an Amazon fulfillment center, and you compare it to, say, Walmart or Target distribution center, Dollar General, one of these other large store chains, they are definitely much more intrusive in many ways. That the buildings, even if they're the same size, they have more activity on site. They have more employees on site. You have a lot, instead of having relatively large number of tractor trailers making deliveries to and from a facility. You have tractor trailers making inbound deliveries. You have delivery vans, many more of them making outbound deliveries. And you have seasonal peaks there too, that have implications for the local areas here. We heard a lot from Amazon, and I don't even want to, I'll answer questions about it, but the innovations that we heard about from the technology side from Amazon were really unbelievable. Almost to the point where drone deliveries was like passe. Yeah, we went there, we did that. That's easy. We may or may not do it everywhere. You're limited in what you can deliver with a drone, but that's the easy side of what they're doing on the technology angles of this. And then definitely the folks on the panel. So we really need expertise. Our local municipal officials and our land use, our planners, our municipal planners need to be educated, get up to speed on what the different world is for e-commerce. It's very labor intensive. We heard this from Philadelphia. Philadelphia gently scolded Amazon right on the end of this panel, because Amazon apparently pays their staff in their Philadelphia facilities so well that the city of Philadelphia can't hire employees for their positions. So Amazon is competing with the city of Philadelphia for a lot of the labor that they're using in their facilities, which Philadelphia, again, the Philadelphia residents said, this is great to hear. This is why we like to have companies do e-commerce facilities in our urban areas where you do have a large supply of labor that can fill a lot of these roles. And then understanding supply chains and how a package gets to your door, or how something gets handled, where it comes from and where it goes to when it gets handled through a local facility. That would be important for people to make decisions on the ground for these facilities here. Our urban context here, again, something different for Philadelphia than for Southampton Township or so in a rural environment here, is that you're competing for curb space when you have these deliveries being made. And this is not to cast aspersions on any of these companies, but this is very much what is the reality in these urban areas. You have an Amazon van or UPS vans making deliveries in an urban context where there's already a lot of competition for the curb space. And the one on the left, I believe that's a bicycle lane on the side of a street. So the van is blocking the street. A vehicle driving on here is going to have to intrude into the bicycle lane. And this doesn't even show what the implications are when you have, say, a bus lane in a crowded, dense urban environment in Philadelphia. So this is why we wanted to have two separate municipal officials here, one from a large city and one from a more rural type of setting, because this is something that you see. And SEPTA was a participant, and we got a lot of input from the Southeast Pennsylvania Transportation Authority for their transit systems in Philadelphia. Gave us some input on the panel that was really valuable for us. We did speak to the folks in Colorado on a retail delivery fee. Is this something that the state of New York is considering?
Not that I.
Okay, there are a number of states where they've discussed it, they've talked about it. So maybe it's not of great interest here. It was a really interesting environment for this. It was contentious politically in Colorado. There was a lot of opposition, mainly from small retailers, and they addressed that by having these small business exemptions. If you sell out of your garage on eBay or something, if you have less than $500,000 in sales during the prior year, you don't have to collect any of these delivery fees. It's only applied to businesses that are already filing state sales tax forms. So the feeling was that the paperwork requirement was not really terribly onerous since they were already filing quarterly or monthly tax forms anyway. And then what struck us when we talked to them was that we thought this fee was very low. That is, it's up to 29 cents per delivery. It was started at 27 and it's indexed for inflation, so it's gone up a penny a year. And they told us that for the estimated monthly revenue for 2024, it's about $80 to $85 million a year. And like for larger states like New York and Pennsylvania, we thought, man, that's an awful lot of political capital to spend to generate not a heck of a lot of revenue in the larger scheme of things. But we're talking about hundreds of millions or billions of dollars of infrastructure needs in Pennsylvania. So that was one of the things that we walked away with as far as findings from that conversation. I'm just going to go through quickly here the case study framework here that we're looking at. We're using this as just an example of how the retail world works, and it's very much overly simplified here. I know anybody who's involved in actually moving freight from one place to another is going to tell me that there are so many things wrong with this, but it's really just illustrating how the public sector, the planners, and the engineers are going to look at something and say, how do we deal with freight transportation needs in an e-commerce world? What we are most interested in are the gray lines here. You can see them very faintly that connect these different parts of the supply chain. You've got, say, this is what's called a multi-channel e-commerce facility. You have West Coast operations, you have East Coast operations, you have supplies and product coming into the West Coast. They're being transported between warehouses, East and West. There's local customers on both sides of the country. And then sometimes you have export moves to Europe. Europe is one of the places in the world where the United States can actually compete. We export things to Europe that we wouldn't necessarily export to Asia because their standard of living is in many cases higher than ours. But we're most interested here. Look, you look at where the customers are throughout the supply chain. And what distinguishes e-commerce, what I'm calling e-commerce from traditional retailing, is that you have direct interactions between these customers and other parts of the supply chain besides a retail store. The retail store is this kind of like brownish yellow one up in the top, just to the bottom left of the customer up on the top there. That's a traditional store. But all these other ones down below, these folks interact with the warehouses. They get shipments directly from the warehouses. They get them from consolidators.
Yeah, the way Amazon works is they have a distribution center that supplies their warehouses for it's called their last mile of delivery.
They go,
And they have a distribution center like they have in Buffalo that'll supply the last mile. They put up warehouses, distribution centers to do the last mile of delivery where they only have vans. Trailers, tractor trailers are delivered from their main distribution center to these, what
the
they call the
secondary
last
ones.
mile
Yeah.
delivery.
Yeah.
That's the way Amazon works. And what was that lady's name from Pennsylvania?
Maura Kennedy
Is that the one that's
for Amazon. Yes. So again, the distinguishing characteristic for e-commerce here is the way these customers at the bottom interact directly with other parts of the supply chain that they never dealt with before. It was very rare in the past. Maybe if you bought something through a Sears catalog, you got a delivery from a warehouse, but that was not, that was the exception, not the rule. So that's a typical, like an e-commerce type of environment. Roughly 3/4 of your customers are not necessarily coming into a retail store. And this is not really necessarily Amazon. This is more like, say, a Best Buy or a Staples or somebody who is not an e-commerce, dedicated e-commerce retailer. They have a combination of both traditional stores and e-commerce facilities. If in a simple retail supply chain before the days of e-commerce, you didn't have these customers at the bottom directly interacting with the warehouses. You didn't have van deliveries to folks' homes directly or to business locations directly. So from a planner's perspective, what we're looking at here is all of these other links in these supply chains go out the window. So what we're looking at here is what is the difference, if I could maybe go back. What's the difference between this type of a supply chain and its implications on the transportation system and this type of a supply chain where you don't have this direct interaction between the customers and the intermediate points in what had been the intermediate points in the supply chain? But what stays consistent pretty much between these, even though they're configured differently, is that both of these supply chains still have the warehouse or something similar to a warehouse. In e-commerce, they're calling them fulfillment centers, which is somewhat different than a warehouse. So what we're looking at now here is where we've picked out, I just submitted to Michael Baker, a set of 21 or 22 facilities around the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that are either traditional distribution centers or e-commerce facilities or fulfillment centers. And let's just look at some of the characteristics between these. This traditional DC, this is a configuration I would describe as a standard cross-dock operation. You have product coming in on one side, getting handled in the facility, getting distributed on the outside. It functions almost like an airline terminal. They have passengers coming in, mixing, and then going out and outbound flights. You see a lot of parking and staging here for tractor trailers, loading dock configurations for tractor trailers. It's almost 1 million square feet, and this is one particular facility out in the Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania, not far from where I live, in fact. And then you look at the number of parking spaces on site here. There's about 200 parking spaces here. And if you'll notice, if you look really closely at this aerial photo, especially the arrow going down to the bottom left, at least 2/3 of these spaces are empty when this photo was taken. These tend to be very efficient operations. There's a lot of automation in these. They don't need as many employees as they may have designed the facility for in many of these cases. This is a comparably sized facility. This is down in York County in Jackson Township. For those of you who don't know, York County is down along the Maryland state line between Harrisburg and Baltimore. So it has become a hotbed of new industrial development for access to the Port of Baltimore, access to the Pennsylvania Turnpike, access to Interstate 81 and 78 to the north. There's a lot of industrial development going on in this area. This is a relatively new, within the last 2 years, Amazon Fulfillment Center. Again, it's about 1 million square feet. You got, similar to the other one, you do have trailer storage on site. Interestingly, on the left side here, these loading docks, you can't really see it at this scale, but the loading docks on the left side of this building are not big enough for tractor trailers. This is where all the loading of delivery vans takes place. This has loading on 3 sides of the facility, not just 2. So it's not a cross dock. You're not bringing product in on one side and sending it out the other side. There's a lot of handling that's being done. These are custom deliveries that are being made. They're taking a book and an article of clothing or 2, and then some garden equipment that you ordered on Amazon, through Amazon, and they're sending it out from 3 different suppliers. They're going out to one customer, which would be you in your home. You will see here that there is a lot more parking spaces here on this site. There are over 1,000. This is going to accommodate over 1,000 employees here. And during peak holiday season, these spaces would all be filled. So there is definitely a substantial peak in activity, say between Thanksgiving and New Year's in a typical year. And they have to design the facility to accommodate that, because if not, you have these, you forget about truck parking, you have employees parking all over the shoulders of the local roadways here because they can't get onto the site. Any questions here? I may run a little long here, but
No, that was excellent.
Yeah. Any questions anybody has? Any thoughts, any ideas? I used to start this presentation like this. I'd say, think about the last thing you ordered online. And was it a good experience? Was it a bad experience? What were some of the challenges you ran into? One thing I will point out on the technology side with Amazon, when we did our early research on this before we even had this idea that we're going to invite them to this expert panel, I had done research at the end of last year on articles in business publications about trends in e-commerce in 2024. And the typical article would be Forbes magazine or something. Hey, 15 trends in e-commerce in 2024. And not one of those 15 had anything to do with transportation. Had nothing to do with the delivery process. It was all about the interaction between the customer and the company. It was all about the biggest problem they have in the e-commerce world is returns. That's why Amazon is now starting to charge you for returns. Once they did, now everybody is going to start to do it. The amount of money that is lost. I was at a trade conference last year, and somebody threw a number out. They said, if you were to take the volume and the value of the returns in the e-commerce world in 2022 or 23, whatever year that data was from, they would be the 6th largest retailer in the United States, just the returns alone, because there were so many of them. And you think about the lost productivity, the energy, just the cost of handling, which is why some of these retailers, if you want to return the often say just keep it, we'll send you another one, because it costs more to handle a return and get it back to where it's supposed to go, then they can't even bother with it. So, just those sorts of things, that so much of this was, they want to reduce the return, so they say, hey, we're developing this artificial intelligence technology where you can log onto your computer and you can try on, I don't know how they do this, but they're gonna be doing this supposedly, where you can try on this article of clothing and see how it looks on you without having to order it and bring it to your home and then send it back because it doesn't fit or either something like that.
Tom, what category of commodity is getting returned the most? Clothing?
Clothing by far, and here I could see it. I'm not I'm not a fan of e-commerce. I'm the type of person, call me old school. I would rather go and buy something at a store because I like to see it and look at it, and not just for clothing. I use e-commerce because I can't stand wasting my time looking for things that aren't in stock. So, but if I know something is in stock, I'd rather go and buy it from the store. But what happens now is a lot of customers are ordering 4 articles of clothing, knowing that they're going to return 3 of them. They're the same size. That's why I think Amazon or some of these have this provision. We are going to charge you for the return unless you're returning it for size. If it's the wrong size, then return it. But folks will say, I know my size. I'm ordering 4 articles of clothing. I want to keep the one that looks best on me. I'm going to return the other 3. That's what they're trying to get out of this. But most of the time, you're not doing that for a book. You're not doing that for a garden tool. If the garden tool doesn't work, it's one thing, but it's clothing by far. That's the most common.
I had to smile because I can remember a Sears catalog and ordering, actually though, ordering from the warehouse
Yes.
for direct delivery, UPS or mail.
Or mail, yeah.
On that, yeah.
The Richard Montagna is from the city of Philadelphia. He mentioned, he says, in reality, the very first, the earliest manifestation of e-commerce, as he thinks of it, was pizza delivery. That you called up on your phone and you ordered something and it showed up at your door. You just think of that as the most primitive early form of e-commerce, although the Sears catalog would predate that. That goes back to the 19th century. When you're getting products delivered out to the prairies, right?
We had the pleasure of visiting an Amazon fulfillment center. Actually, it was the Amazon Robotics Fulfillment Center in Syracuse, 3 billion square feet in 2023. And 2 things that really struck me about that was, one is the automation. So they may have like multiple stations, let's say, with people picking products and filling boxes. And, they are literally just installing a robot, so you can see and they said right in front of all the people working there, like, oh yeah, the next one here, and then we're gonna put one there, like, you're gonna be gone.
Yeah.
And then one person runs all the robots instead of like having to be in each station. And the other was, this particular facility also was one of the ones that took in some returns. And they said that that's essentially their philanthropic side of their business, because it's not worth it for them to restock it or repackage it and try to resell it again, that they just give it all away.
That's amazing.
So they said, if you have an Amazon fulfillment center in your community, you shouldn't be afraid to ask for donations.
You have to, like,
because they
clothing
really
banks
have
or-
stuff to
yeah.
give.
Yeah. Smart. Well, thank you, folks. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
any other questions for Tom? Or
Just one quick question. Looking at Amazon where they have their own fleet of, last mile delivery vehicles for the most part. Have other large companies looked at more vertical integration of the supply chain from, I guess, start to that last month?
It's funny you mention that, because one of the things that triggered me to make this forecast, this prediction that you're not gonna hear about e-commerce anymore, it's just gonna be commerce, is that Walmart. That they've actually integrated into, like, there's almost no difference between their stores and their distribution center. That if you place an online order with Walmart, there's a really good chance that the stuff is being delivered to you directly from a store. They have an associate walking around a store and taking things off the shelf to help fill your order. I actually think, and I didn't hear this from Amazon, and you can quote me, it's kind of a prediction. I think Amazon, one of Amazon's future visions here is to get out of the delivery business. Because the one thing, when the early days of e-commerce, they said, I don't think this is really going to be a profitable operation in the long run. Because what Amazon is doing by delivering to your front door is that they're paying somebody to fill that last step of the supply chain that you used to do for free. And so the cost of that has now started to make e-commerce, you actually have to pay more for an e-commerce delivery for many products than you would have had to pay if you walked in the store. Whereas in the early days of e-commerce, it was money saving. Like, oh, it saves time. They're selling it cheaper online. Those are going away. So I think my prediction that they're gonna migrate to this hybrid model where that what Amazon will really want to do is to deliver to a local hub and have you pick it up on your way home from work or when you're out on running errands on a Saturday or something. So
They don't use, their own trucks anymore.
some of them are, some of them, they're contract drivers.
Most of these, last mile, they're all not company owned, they're owned by individuals that are running it. And their distribution warehouses, they're not actually warehouses, they use owner operators to
To do the over the road,
deliver the trailers to the, what you call the last mile
right?
distribution center, so they don't own any trucking or any vans themselves.
But when you hear about things like the cost of labor and
Well,
Uber's
who owns
challenge,
those new electric vans around here? They're contracted out. All of these, distribution centers are contracted out. They don't own anything. That surprises me because they just introduced these Rivian electrics here. And they have yet to go through a northeast winter with them. With their battery driven, and a driver needs some heat during the day, and that's gonna be very interesting to watch. But you're telling me they're not owned by Amazon? No, they're not.
Yeah,
They,
that's
they
true.
designate what vehicles they're supposed to have, but they don't own.
they could have an Amazon logo on it. Amazon may be like a leasing agent or something for
Oh.
the actual contract, right?
That's
Yeah.
correct.
I think we heard at that Syracuse that 85% of the vehicles that you see that say Amazon. With the Amazon driver, Amazon uniform are actually independent contractors. And some of them own hundreds, some of them own like 5 vans, some of them own 500 vans. And it's
You're
all independent, but Amazon has a lot of control over it. I mean,
It's like a
to the point
McDonald's
of-
franchise,
Yeah, of even having like cameras inside the van monitoring the driver's behavior. Like,
Yes.
are their eyes looking at a phone or are they, I mean, I've even heard stories about like drivers getting warnings about like singing while they're driving because it's a distraction. So they are controlled very tightly by Amazon, but they're actually, so they're not really having to own a lot of that liability. And to Lou's point, all of the tractor trailer deliveries are independent because they don't want to deal
Amazon's
with it.
trailers.
Yeah, they're Amazon's trailers, but the drivers, and so anytime someone says, oh, call us Amazon truck, that's not us. Not our driver. They can just say, whatever happens outside the gate,
The
that's
liability is crazy.
that's somebody else, that's not us, even though the demand is clearly being created by them, but they've definitely found a way to work within sort of the box they want to work in and outsource everything else.
The Amazon representative Maura did mention this, and I think it's probably more of an issue in the Northeast than anywhere else. She said that they are very ambitious, they're very aggressive about implementing electric vehicles, electric delivery vans. She says the single biggest constraint by far is the limited grid capacity of many of the areas where they operate in. And she mentioned Pennsylvania in particular, I'm sure in parts of upstate New York, it's the same way. A lot of it's the rural nature of the area. They just don't have sufficient grid capacity. If you think about it, delivery van is ideal for an electric vehicle because it's being used during long stretches of the day and then it's being shut down. Unlike an over-the-road truck where you're driving across the country for 3 or 4 days, it's being shut down overnight and it's parked somewhere. So that's the perfect opportunity to recharge it. She said even with that, they're running into a lot of issues with grid capacity where they just can't build the charging stations.
They have a different business model than, say, Walmart. They own all of their own trucks.
Yeah.
The trailers. Everybody thinks that Walmart makes their money selling stuff across the counter. That's not true.
They've refined the supply chain.
They,
Yeah.
when they buy something, that stuff is bought, put into their distribution center, delivered to the stores. It's all shelf order. And they got 90 days to pay it. They're operating on somebody else's money all the time. Supermarket chains do that. They're not making any money. 2% going across the counter. That's not how they make their money. The buyers make a good portion of the money. Because when you want to put something in a Walmart store or a big chain, you go to the buyer and the buyer, they'll tell you like Campbell's soup. I know this because I worked at a supermarket chain for 25 years. As a driver and president of the union. And I dealt with these kind of things, so, they order this stuff, they'll go to Campbell's and say they wanna order X number of whatever, Campbell's soup. They'll go to them and they'll say, this is what we gotta have. You know, it's Campbell's soup will say, Campbell's, Walmart will say, you wanna put them in our stores? This is what we're gonna pay you. That's how they do it. It's the buyers make a good portion of the money. People don't realize that they don't make no money selling this stuff, 2%. That's what they operate on across the county. And with the theft today in the stores, that's why they're locking things up.
Hmm.
That's what goes on with it. All of these things, they operate on somebody else's money.
It's all
90 days pay,
You could almost
60
say
days
it's-
pay, that stuff is bought. Put through a distribution center, put on the shelves, and before they even pay for it, it's sold. That's the way they operate.
Thank you,
There's
everybody.
somebody to seek here.
No, you're
Okay.
welcome to stay there. Great conversation. And, thank you, Tom, for,
Thanks
great
for having me.
presentation. And, in the interest of time, we'll have to move on here. But I think, I know this is a topic that's come up in our local plan, you know, and in almost every level of planning that I've been involved in. You know, you hear at local level, you know, almost every small, even the smallest of studies. What about these deliveries? What about these deliveries? And we just don't have a lot of data. You know, like we can't throw a traffic counter out and like we could before and count the number of trucks. Cause it just shows up as a van, you know, you don't know if it's a delivery van, you don't know if
That's
it's
what we're
a,
finding out in our case.
yeah, if it's, especially now the vans are some of them are smaller, so it could just look like a passenger van. Makes it very difficult. And then, you know, we're hearing at state level, hearing at the regional level, federal level, everything. So definitely something we want. So next, moving on here. I wanted to briefly give you an update on this New York State freight plan. And I know that Dave Rosenberg is on the line, so I'm just gonna say something briefly here and then turn it over to him. So the state freight plan was approved by the Office of the Secretary of Transportation, US DOT, back in September. On time with no lapse in our National Highway Freight Program funding. All the documents, and there are many, are online at this site. I will send out the link with the notes. Want to take a look at it? I've also created a couple of just simple notes on, you know, what's in the plan that's impacts our region. So if anybody wants to talk about that offline, I can share that as well. One of the products that was also developed with the freight plan that's really cool to check out is a web atlas, which is at that freightatlas.transportny.org, and I'll also send out that address with the meeting notes. This is just a screenshot of it to the right, which is looking at road condition and trans-search tonnage. But there's tons of freight data available in there. All modes, and I think it's just a really cool tool worth checking out. And I wanted to pause and see if anyone online or in the room from DOT wanted to say anything else about the state freight plan. Okay, great. Well, seeing that we'll go ahead and move on. Oh, I did want to share with you, Gautam Mani from FHWA couldn't be here today. But he did send me this really nice email, and I wanted to just read part of it to you. This is regarding the state freight plan. He said, it's very unusual for a state freight plan to be cleared for approval by headquarters with no edits. Speaks to the efforts of Dave Rosenberg, others at New York State DOT, the consultant team, and participation of NPOs like the Transportation Council and their members. All involved should be very proud of the quality of the final plan. So just wanted to share that. Lots of kudos from the feds as well.
Hey, Chris, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can. Dave, go ahead.
Awesome. Okay, yes. So David Rosenberg speaking from New York State DOT. Are we sharing the web atlas on the screen? Or no?
Let me stop sharing here, maybe that will
Okay.
allow you to. Okay, it looks like it's being shared now. Can anybody online confirm that they're seeing it?
Yep, we can see it online.
Okay, awesome. So we did develop the Web Atlas with SUNY Avail, and it is very cool, and you guys should check it out. So what it pulls up here, I know there's somebody from the Rail Bureau who's now retired. We have the rail network on here, and you can go into a variety of things with this. So we know somebody from the ports is here. We have ports in here. We have border crossings in here. So you can actually look where the rail network impacts with the ports. Variety of networks in here, as Chris mentioned. So you have the ports, we have the border crossings, air cargo facilities, and we'll turn the rail network off. And now we have the Federal National Highway Freight Network. And then quickly, if you hit one of these locations, it will show you the stats. How many trucks come over these important border crossings. And then I just want to show Tom, and we have our truck parking inventory on here as well. And we did a buffer. And as Chris said, you can go into the info button and download that data. So this has a lot of functionality. This is basically the front end. Avail working through this on the back end. You can create maps very quickly, download data, and look at the system. So I just wanted to plug the Web Atlas a little bit, and just wanted to thank everyone for the participation in the freight plan, because the reason it got through like it did with USDOT was all the work that people put in, the MPOs, asset owners, you know, everyone, OIDA, Tanny, we just appreciate the support, you know, and the input on this. So that's it, Chris, and I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
It's really, really neat product. Definitely encourage everybody to check it out. I think it has a lot of great uses. All right, so moving on. He already introduced himself, but I wanted to just reintroduce Adam McCarville, who is managing our Clean Communities program now. Adam comes to us from the clean energy world, so he knows a lot about this topic, and he's approached this this particular program with a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of realism, and he's been great to work with so far. And I can tell that he's just going to do a great job with growing the program. So Adam, he's going to provide us with our Capital District Clean Communities update for this meeting.
So yeah, hi everyone. I just want to do a quick, also kind of past introduction piece of, so I came out of the Long Island High Tech Incubator, which is focusing on the growth of renewable energy, clean tech startups, and as well as biotech and infotech. So it's kind of the integration of different technology spaces, but I had my presence mostly in the clean tech space. So I appreciate the introduction, Chris. And so in my time there, I actually had some really cool experiences working closely with two transportation and freight focused startups on Screen, Amegy, and Unique Electric Solutions. To start, I'll actually start with Unique Electric Solutions since we came out of e-commerce. Chris, if you could click on that.
Sure. Oops. Let's see.
I also have to mention, Adam was also, I worked for Suffolk County government, and he interned at our Office of Energy and Clean Climate Action. Did a phenomenal job there, and the director that he worked for, and she had a lot of great things to say about that, so.
So it doesn't have, I don't have sound here.
No, it's not a video.
Okay.
Just scroll for a little bit. I think it
Sure.
should- Yeah, right there. That's perfect. So their value proposition or what they bring to the table in terms of their company is that they focus on the retrofitting of old vehicles and in class 4 to 7 trucks, but turning them into clean energy vehicles. Again, it's an EV chassis that they've designed that it's for the, up to 150 miles and more of charging options. So I just wanted to show this, that, hey, look, there's a cool company out there that is really in the game of trying to retrofit, fill that niche of avoiding scrappage when possible. And their target market can be is also in the UPS truck space as well. They've done plenty of pilots in that. California specifically, as the gentleman up front actually noted, their regionality is definitely where they're targeting it. They're targeting their market, making sure that the technology aligns with the region and the markets that are existing throughout the country. So it was a very great point that, not every region will have the best usability and use case for certain technologies. So Chris, if you could pull us out of that one.
All right.
So the next company I just wanted to, show some cool things with is Amogy. So they're on the other side of the spectrum, I think. They were a very, very incredibly fast growing company that I'm very grateful that I've had the opportunity to work closely with. They focus on ammonia power. Wow, what the heck does that mean? So what they do is they have developed an ammonia splitting technology that NH3 is the ammonia chemical base, and what they do is they split it out to be hydrogen and nitrogen. So it's a fuel cell technology that splits ammonia down into the use of fuel. They have scaled it up from everything from drone to then a tractor, then to a 16-wheeler, and then now they're focusing on the maritime industry because they'd like to help out with the freight maritime delivery technology area. And I guess I wanted to show you a quick video of that. So kind of want to split things up a bit.
Now, for the folks online, if you can't hear the video, I will send out the link as well. We've had trouble in the past with this, but just. Is that it?
Yeah, that's all. So definitely one of the lessons learned in this space is certainly that there might be some really, really cool technologies out there, but the markets need to be created. And that's something that's a pain point for almost all these companies that are in this space, in the innovation space. And so I think that as planners and in working, local governments and everything, I think that's where the conversation point can really be can grow, and there's a lot of opportunity for policy creation and piloting and getting the end users in the mix of understanding, what technologies are out there and how they can be used possibly in the future. I think that's important in the conversation. Let's see here. I think that was all for that section. For the actual what we've been doing recently at the Capital District Clean Communities, I happen to have a very cool event at the Port of Albany, where we went over, the topic at focus was understanding the implications and connection between freight planning and the offshore wind industry. How there's some really cool studies that are going on that are going to target how we can really get the pain point of large industrial materials being transported through New York and the infrastructure that we currently have at hand for the roadways, the implication that could have on property owners. And, there's been some cool work that Chris has done for freight planning in that space. Our next event that we did was we visited the Sprague Energy Terminal, which focuses on everything from diesel to renewable diesel, biodiesel. There, was a really cool place over in over by Rensselaer. And I just wanted to quickly share out some of the findings from that. So we really learned about renewable diesel from a different lens than I previously heard of it. In that it's not the same as biodiesel. I'm sure everyone in the room probably knows that, but to me, it was a new concept. But it's very interesting how it boasts a higher density output than and better combustion than traditional diesel. We have, it's also interesting that the technologies that you would put it into don't need to be necessarily retrofitted if you're able to gather enough stock of it. That might be the pain point in that there's, you're gathering stock from cooking oils, animal fats, and that process, it might not be built out fully yet. I mean, right now, we're only seeing the markets building out in California. Delivery is available in New York, but incentives are not as high as say in California right now. The highest percentage of use transportation and everything is definitely in California. And also really important note is that unlike biodiesel, renewable diesel is a hydrogenated, which allows it to act at a lower temperature level. So we're not talking about having that cold level barrier that you would find in biodiesel, which I find to be a really cool hurdle that they've been able to hop there. That also has to do with water traction and that's another pain point as well. So going back to another point. So the reason that in California it's so popular right now and growing is that they have something called the low carbon fuel standard, which is really incentivizing. I actually kind of recommend maybe looking into that if you're interested. And it just incentivizes the use of cleaner fuels and makes it so that it's worth actually selling the fuel instead of it being something where they have to eat the cost of doing something clean for the environment. And just an overall note, renewable diesel from the studies and papers I've read, it's on average 65% reduction of carbon intensity compared to petroleum-based diesel. So I think that that's a step in the right direction. Might be a use of a good drop-in fuel for bridging the gap where, I mean, we've got these cool technologies that are coming in the future that I was showing off, but the markets aren't there yet. The technology might not be built out. The end user comfortability and use is not quite there. And so we need to somehow connect the dots. And I think that's a good place to start. The final event that we've done recently was a bus scrappage event. Part of the New York State Bus Incentive Program, where NYSERDA provides an additional, it's like it's sort of a bonus for bus program, for bus projects where they, at the end use of replacing a vehicle with an electric bus or say an alternative vehicle bus, mostly electric in this point, they are able to provide a bonus credit to scrap the bus and render it useless, which maybe there's a couple angles as to whether that's a good idea, bad idea, but I just wanted to show off that that's a thing that happens, is that the vehicles get scrapped in the yard and rendered useless. But anyways, I just wanted to show that off. So that's what we've been up to.
Real quick, actually, on the Sprague component for the renewable diesel, the port just had a conversation with Global the end of last week about, we're part of an organization called Green Marine.
Yeah.
Which is all about promoting sustainability in the maritime industry. The first port to join that in New York, it's voluntary, commitment to making sure that our efforts are becoming more and more, carbon free and more sustainable. And renewable diesel was a component that we spoke about potentially utilizing or trying to figure out a way of getting a distribution channel to the ports, diesel running equipment. So it's like you said, it's predominantly in California right now, and there's not much incentive to bring it to New York. So that was kind of the roadblock we initially hit, but it's very timely conversation and presentation.
I've heard there's a lot of different mechanisms in different states that are just, we might have to copy a few models.
Yeah.
That it might take some time to get that oomph of willingly going in that direction and trying to balance funds where it once were and kind of drawing it in to incentivize the use. But I think we'll get there. And also, one of the cool things recently is that in New York City, their ferries have, recently made, contracts to say we're gonna be using renewable diesel moving forward, so we'll see that.
On your ammonia powered vessel there, are they running on liquid ammonia or are they gaseous?
So that's, I never got to play on the technology based side of that, but from what I had seen, I believe, I believe it's in the gaseous form. That's kind of where, my knowledge base goes out the window, but.
I'm sorry, but the thing about ammonia has to make me smile. I had the good fortune as a teenager to work on a farm for 5 summers and cleaned out a number of chicken and pig barns. I know where ammonia comes from. And secondly, it used to be that human waste was shipped in boats. And that started generating ammonia to dangerous levels in boats. And therefore, listen to the words I'm going to say very carefully. That initiated the expression ship hire in transit. I'll leave it at that.
Hey, Chris,
Yes,
it's Pete. I wanted to, is it okay if I interject something?
of course.
I just, for our speaker, it was interesting, that whole situation with the ammonia tugboat. And as many of you know, I get very jumpy whenever we start talking about marine transportation and boats and all kinds of fun stuff, because I've been involved in quite a few of these projects. And the thing that comes to mind when you talked about markets, that's really where the frustration and the pain point is on this. And I think some of the other guys here, Mike and Izdebski and Jeff Gert Savage, know where I'm going with this. I was involved with the project that created Solaris, which that tugboat had to pass on its way out of the Rondout Creek on its voyage there. And Solaris at its time, we're talking 7-8 years ago now, was the first ever United States Coast Guard certified solar electric tour boat in American history. To my knowledge, it still is the only solar USCG certified solar electric. I'm sorry, did I say tugboat? I meant to say tour boat. And to my knowledge, it is still the only Coast Guard certified solar electric tour boat out there. The reason why I say that is that's a boat that performs its tasks perfectly. It's got the power plant and everything works fine. It's not experimental in any way. It runs fine. It's carrying passengers now for 7 years. And it's not like there's a whole bunch of Solarises popping up all over the place carrying passengers. Instead, we have a whole bunch of old diesel smoky tour boats falling apart in various stages of disrepair across our state and across the country. That's just reality. I hate to sound mean, but I know a lot of the owners. So, that's a challenge, because even when you have technology that works, it doesn't guarantee you're going to have a market. And as Mr. Borton is finding out with those boats that he's creating, he's been redesigning different ideas. We have them at the Waterford Canal Festival every year. You can get a free ride on a solar powered boat. Some people may not even know that's what it is. Runs fine. But that doesn't mean that there's people jumping to buy them. And I have to say that's been the biggest source of frustration for me. And hopefully maybe, by working together, we can find answers for some of this stuff. But I applaud the folks there with their effort. I just hope that there's a market out there.
Very good points, Pete. Appreciate it.
It goes to show you the importance of standardization when you're doing anything to scale. That you can see it in almost any industry. I happened to be on the elevator with a couple of TV executives some years ago, and they were describing what they saw as the collapse of the cable news industry. It's still around, but what's basically what they said is that because there are so many different options, none of them can generate a sufficient audience to justify the cost of putting a news operation together and paying reporters and personalities to do it. So they're all run at a loss. You can see this here. If there was only one solar technology, there was no ammonia, and there was no diesel, there was no nothing else, then you would have the economies of scale that you would need to really justify the investment to go and make these things. Think of the investment you have to come up with to even build it and have all the components built in. If there are 25 different technologies out there, somebody has to pick one, or something has to emerge as the forerunner here. Because then you'll have the scale that you would need to go and justify investing in the plant and everything else to make these.
Yeah, and I also want to clarify too, that for the ammonia company, their biggest investor base is in Singapore and, Norway currently. So that's, they're entering into the US market. They were four MIT grads that created this company in a 2-year, well, now 4-year span. So they're growing fast. It's an interesting tech. We'll see what happens.
Was it at the Stony Brook incubator?
It was actually at, they currently still base at a new lab in Brooklyn, and they also have a facility down in Houston now that they expanded to.
I'm sorry, I hope I'm not talking over somebody. You raise a good point about the market, the overseas. That's another unfortunate problem we have, and that is even in the United States. Okay, obviously we're supporting the capital region of New York State here with this group this morning. And so take, for example, the gentleman with the solar boats. Well, he's had more luck getting these things built everywhere but in the state of New York. That's, it's good for him ultimately. It really sucks for us in New York. And I'm thinking about your company there, the fact that they're having luck in Singapore and places like that. That's great for business in Singapore. And obviously I hope that it works well for them there. But that's really where the challenge is how do we get that stuff to work out here so that it benefits the capital region of New York?
Yeah, good points. Yeah. And currently we'll see, because Amazon's vested in them, so maybe they'll do something.
Excellent. So, folks
If I could just
online. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Pete, I just want to comment just a little bit about the tour boat industry. I'm a USGS licensed merchant mariner, and I do moonlight as a tour boat captain. Most of those operations are shoestring operations, and every tour boat that operates in New York State is a one-off. There's no sister ships of anything.
Right.
And so, we have to kind of think like you've got these tugboats and they look filthy and they are, but you got to think about the emissions they're deferring, because like a truck would use 10 times as much fuel as a tugboat to move the same commodity, and a train would use half or twice the amount as a tugboat. So the tug and barge is what, a tenth of a truck, and a train is I think a fifth of the emissions of. So that's one way to look at it. Another way, and I did a study when I worked at Parks and Rec, when we were looking at the carbon footprint of, say, Saratoga Spa State Park, and it wasn't the cleanest thing in the world, but we also looked at what would other people be doing with their time. Like the people who are on the tour boat for 2 hours or an hour and a half, what other things would it be carbon intensive that they're doing? So there's other ways to look at it, and I think that the particularly on the canal system, because the canal system, the boats are often not on plane; they're at displacement mode, meaning it's going slowly, and solar works for that. It really doesn't work for planing haul boats or larger vessels. So I think there's opportunity there, but just understanding the industry, it seems like a tough lift, and you guys absolutely advanced the thinking about it. No question about that. I just want.
Well, Jeff, you raise a great point, because take the ladies up in Schuylerville. They would love to have one of David Borton's boats. They're the perfect customer for it, and the boat that they have now can no longer pass the Coast Guard certifications for passengers. They basically have a 50-foot 6-pack up there in Schuylerville, which is is ridiculous. 6-pack means 6 passengers, uninspected passenger vessel, because it cannot pass the Coast Guard. They need something else. The problem is most of these tour boat companies across the state of New York would never have the money to buy a new boat of any kind.
Sure.
And a solar boat, there aren't any used ones. They're not particularly expensive compared to new boats with conventional engines. It's just there are none that these people can afford, so they keep running the old stuff. And unfortunately, in some cases, that's causing their actual businesses to die out, because they literally cannot replace what they have. So that is an issue. I hopefully that won't happen on the tugboat side, because hopefully there's more money floating around with the marine transportation interests, and good ideas will simply be adopted. But in the tour boat operation, that's definitely true, and you're very right about that, Jeff.
Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you. Great discussion. Adam, it sounds like you have a great topic for your next Clean Communities quarterly meeting, so maybe that's something to consider. thanks to everybody online who contributed. You should be seeing a screen that says join our mailing list. If you're not, let me know. And I encourage everyone to join the Clean Communities mailing list. Lots of interesting stuff. Lots of interesting topics, always up for debate, which we do like so. Thank you, Adam. And I can cut you off.
No, that was all. Yeah,
Is
I
that
was
all
gonna
right?
say, if you wanted to drop the link to that, 'cause I think I linked it on here. But,
Yeah, I'll do that. I think you'll do it for this screen, but I'll
No worries.
definitely do it
Yeah.
with the notes. We can send that out in the email, we'll send that out as well. And of course, if you're looking for it sooner, just Google Capital District Clean Communities. I'm sure I'll be the first. So next on our agenda, I just wanted to give you a quick update on our Metropolitan Transportation Plan update process, which is called In Motion 2050. I know that we've updated you at our past meetings about this, and I just wanted to give you a quick update as well. And I appreciate everyone here who I know you've been involved in this, and I encourage you again, if you haven't been involved, to get involved. You can see on the right sort of the roadmap to the process and a green arrow of where we are right now. We've completed phases 1 and 2, which is the data collection and inform process. We're moving into phase 3, which will run through February 2025, which is called the Imagine process. We've had 2 rounds of public input and a vision statement approved by our by our policy board, at their September meeting. As far as what we're working on right now, the consultant and our team here is working on a draft needs assessment report. Currently, we're working on a scenario planning white paper. We had a scenario planning workshop last week where lots of folks were involved and thinking about the future transportation in our region. What's it going to look like? Is it going to be just like it is today? Is it going to be something different, somewhere in between? And so that's what scenario planning does for us. We're working on finishing a regional photo and video collection. We actually got a lot of really cool freight pictures and video shots. Those are being finalized, and I'll share those with you at a future meeting. And our next task force meeting, it says November 2025. We actually just passed it. It was last week. It was that scenario planning workshop. So this is a little bit dated on the slide here. But if you want to get involved, let me know, and we'll get you set up for the next meeting, which I believe will be sometime in January. But definitely confirm with me if you get involved with that. Wanted to just briefly provide an update on our overdimension routing planning that we've been doing. This is, as you know, an issue we discussed at length at our last meeting. It was, I don't want to say a new issue to us, but it was certainly something that we started, putting some resources into at that time. And we're continuing to do that. And I just wanted to give you a quick update on that. We're continuing to develop our mapping geodatabase and background information, which was the map that we had shown at the last meeting. And we're coordinating with the folks who've been involved to specify what the issues are at each of these pinch points. In other words, is it a low bridge, is it a turn radius, so that we can start to put together a family of potential projects to address the issue and to try to get these things off of local roads, get them where they should be, make the changes that we need to make this happen and support our economy as well. As far as, longer term or the next year, we're trying to develop a potential scope for a project for our 2025-26 UPWP, which is essentially our budget document, which allows us to actually spend money on something and to work on something and make part of our work program. And that would happen if it does next April, pending policy board approval. In the meantime, as projects come up, we're trying to just, if there's something that we see that we say, hey, this seems like it could potentially be a problem, we're trying to put the 2 parties in the same room at the same time and say, hey, you need to talk to these folks about the project that you have going on, what you might be able to do to accommodate this. And to be honest, a lot of times, as we learn from the carriers, it's not like you can't do something. It's just some minor, I'll say, design considerations you need to take into account to allow one of these huge vehicles to be able to travel, say, over a roundabout or something. So that's what's going on with that. Not too much new since the last time, but we've been doing a lot of that.
Is that information being shared with, say, DOT and things like that for their mapping purposes, or
Yeah, I mean, we're still really early. We don't have like the database built yet. Once we do, and we get a project here, 100% DOT will be involved. We'll be
Well, I mean, when I left, there was some move afoot to do, they were doing driven LiDAR data collection. So we were more or less creating tunnels,
Mhm.
for clearances. And, even, prior to my departure 5 years ago, mapping of high and wide routes was not a popular topic. It was downright difficult, actually. So I'm seeing some of this kind of collection and sharing, would be advantageous to not only the carrier, but I would think the department would see a benefit from it too, in the sense of, while the carrier is supposed to certify their route as being clearance, it doesn't hurt to have the system look at the route too, and push a vehicle down through it. It's high horsepower stuff, but
No, that's great. That's excellent. We're trying to create, a two-way flow of information from them to us as well. So yeah, absolutely, gonna share it wide with whatever audience wants to receive it for
Yeah.
sure, and definitely. But thanks to everybody who's contributed to that as well. This is the draft map. I really can't see it there, but just, we're working on it. All right, so getting to our final action, or our final agenda item here, just wanted to provide one other update. Our certification improvement program project solicitation is now open. Proposals are due December 6th at 5:00 p.m. This is for, projects to be added for funding for design and construction from the 2025 to 2030 period. If you want more information about that, feel free to ask me. Also, it's on the front page of our website. If you want some basic information. We do have a new set of categories this year, or the same types of projects are eligible. We have a category that's sort of like an other category that's called freight congestion and air quality. And that's to try to implement projects from our freight plans, state's freight plans, our congestion management process, and any other air quality projects. Those don't necessarily fit nicely into our evaluation process for, say, like a bridge. So, but we definitely want to make sure that and emphasize that those types of projects are eligible. And now it's 10:19. We have 11 minutes left. I just wanted to open the floor for any member updates, either in the room or online.
Chris, has there been any movement on truck parking around exit 25A that was looked at?
So I can't speak to any specific efforts. I know that we've provided some recommendations about things that we think are possible out there. I'm not sure if the town or DOT is pursuing anything that I know of as of right now.
There's a large warehouse just going in over on the corner. The name of it is retail. I think they're down by the mall in Waterden. They're going to be moving up there. So I was just wondering, that's going to create more problems with truck parking.
Yeah, I mean, we're not involved.
We're supposed to
Yeah.
start this year. I don't know. I don't see anybody here from Rotterdam, so.
I think maybe someone from Rotterdam is on the line. I don't know if they can speak to the project or not, but yeah, I mean, we don't have a part of the process for local development projects, but I mean, I think we've at least tried to provide what we think folks should do when something like this comes in. And certainly if the town or county or anybody's looking for guidance or our input, we'd be happy to give that to them.
It's not a Sam's Club. I forgot the name of it. I don't shop there.
Like a big box store. BJ's. Any other member updates? folks online, folks in the room. All right, so moving on, to the end of our meeting, some action items here, consider joining the Clean Communities mailing list. I'd also, encourage you to, if you're not already, get involved in our Metropolitan Transportation Plan update, the in-motion plan. And definitely encourage you to check out the New York State Freight Plan and the Web Atlas that we mentioned earlier. Our 2025 meeting dates are continue to be the third Wednesday of February, May, August, and November. All the meetings are at 9 a.m. We'll continue to go hybrid as long as folks still want to attend online. I think it's been working well. And I will send out save the dates for those meetings, Outlook calendar invites before the meeting. So that being said, thank you everybody for attending in person. Thank you everybody online. And I hope everyone has a happy and safe and healthy holiday season, and we'll see you next year. Thanks.
Thanks.
Great presentation. So.